the more reason that he should sign quickly. Sign, Valois, sign, roared Gorenflot. You gave me till midnight, said the king piteously. Ah, you hope to be rescued. He shall die if he does not sign, cried the Duchess. Gorenflot offered him the pen, the noise outside redoubled. A new troop, cried a monk, they are surrounding the abbey. The Swiss, cried Foulon, are advancing on the right. Well, we will defend ourselves. With such a hostage in our hands we need not surrender. He has signed, cried Gorenflot, tearing the paper from Henry, who buried his face in his hands. Then you are king, cried the cardinal to the duke, take the precious paper. The king overturned the little lamp which alone lighted the scene, but the duke already held the parchment. What shall we do? Said a monk. Here is Crillon with his guards threatening to break in the doors. In the king's name, cried the powerful voice of Crillon. There is no king, cried Gorenflot through the window. Who says that? Cried Crillon. I. Break in the doors, Monsieur Crillon, said from outside, a voice which made the hair of all the monks, real and pretended, stand on end. Yes, sire, replied Crillon, giving a tremendous blow with a hatchet on the door. What do you want? Said the prior, going to the window. Ah, it is you, Foulon, replied the same voice. I want my Jester who is in one of your cells. I want Chicot, I am ennuyé at the Louvre. And I have been much amused, my son, said Chicot, throwing off his hood, and pushing his way through the crowd of monks who recoiled with a cry of terror. At this moment the Duc de Guise, advancing to a lamp, read the signature obtained with so much labour. It was Chicot I. Chicot, cried he, 1,000 devils. Let us fly, said the cardinal, we are lost. Ah, cried Chicot, turning to Gorenflot, who was nearly fainting, and he began to strike him with the cord he had round his waist. Chapter 89. Interest and Capital. As the king spoke and the conspirators listened, they passed from astonishment to terror. Chicot I relinquished his role of apparent terror, threw back his hood, crossed his arms, and while Gorenflot fled at his utmost speed, sustained, firm and smiling, the first shock. It was a terrible moment, for the gentlemen, furious at the mystification of which they had been the dupes, advanced menacingly on the Gascon. But this unarmed man, his breast covered only by his arms, this laughing face, stopped them still more than the remonstrance of the cardinal, who said to them that Chicot's death could serve no end, but on the contrary would be terribly avenged by the king, who was the Jester's accomplice in this scene of terrible buffoonery. The result was that daggers and rapiers were lowered before Chicot, who continued to laugh in their faces. However, the king's menaces and Crillon's blows became more vehement, and it was evident that the door could not long resist such an attack. Thus, after a moment's deliberation, the Duc de Guise gave the order for retreat. This order made Chicot smile, for during his nights with Gorenflot, he had examined the cave and found out the door, of which he had informed the king, who had placed there Torquenot, lieutenant of the Swiss guards. It was then evident that the leaguers, one after another, were about to throw themselves into the trap. The cardinal made off first, followed by about 20 gentlemen. Then Chicot saw the duke pass with about the same number, and afterwards Mayenne. When Chicot saw him go he laughed outright. 10 minutes passed, during which he listened earnestly, thinking to hear the noise of the leaguers sent back into the cave, but to his astonishment, the sound continued to go further and further off. His laugh began to change into oaths. Time passed and the leaguers did not return. Had they seen that the door was guarded and found another way out? Chicot was about to rush from the cell, when all at once the door was obstructed by a mass which fell at his feet and began to tear its hair. Ah, wretch that I am, cried the monk. Oh, my good Chicot, pardon me, pardon me. How did Gorenflot, who went first, return now alone, was the question that presented itself to Chicot's mind. Oh, my good Chicot, he continued to cry, pardon your unworthy friend who repents at your knees. But how is it you have not fled with the others? Because the Lord in his anger has struck me with obesity, and I could not pass where the others did. Oh, unlucky stomach, oh, miserable paunch, cried the monk, striking with his 2 hands the part he apostrophized. Ah, why am not I thin like you, Chicot? Chicot understood nothing of the lamentations of the monk. But the others are flying then, cried he in a voice of thunder. Pardieu, what should they do? Wait to be hung, oh, unlucky paunch. Silence and answer me. Interrogate me, Chicot, you have the right. How are the others escaping? As fast as they can. So I imagine, but where? By the hole. Mordieu, what hole? The hole in the cemetery cellar. Is that what you call the cave? Oh no, the door of that was guarded outside. The great cardinal, just as he was about to open it, heard a Swiss say, Mich Dwistel, which means, I am thirsty. Venter de bitch, so then they took another way. Yes, dear Chicot, they are getting out through the cellar. How does that run? From the crypt to the Porte Saint-Jacques. You lie, I should have seen them repass before this cell. No, dear Chicot, they thought they had not time for that, so they are creeping out through the air hole. What hole? One which looks into the garden, and serves to light the cellar. So that you... I was too big and could not pass, and they drew me back by my legs, because I intercepted the way for the others. Then he who is bigger than you. He's whose? Oh, Holy Virgin, I promise you a dozen wax candles if he also cannot pass. Chicot. Get up. The monk raised himself from the ground as quickly as he could. Now lead me to the hole. Where you wish. Go on then, wretch. Gorenflot went on as fast as he was able, while Chicot indulged himself by giving him a few blows with the cord. They traversed the corridor and descended into the garden. Here, this way, said Gorenflot. Hold your tongue and go on. There it is, and exhausted by his efforts, the monk sank on the grass while Chicot, hearing groans, advanced, and saw something protruding through the hole. By the side of this something lay a frock and a sword. It was evident that the individual in the hole had taken off successively all the loose clothing which increased his size, and yet, like Gorenflot, he was making useless efforts to get through. Mordieu, ventrebleu, sangdian, cried a stifled voice. I would rather pass through the midst of the guards. Do not pull so hard, my friends, I shall come through gradually. I feel that I advance not quickly, it is true, but I do advance. Venter de bitch, murmured Chicot, it is de Mayenne. Holy Virgin, you have gained your candles. And he made a noise with his feet like some one running fast. They are coming, cried several voices from inside. All, cried Chicot as if out of breath, it is you, miserable monk. Say nothing, Monseigneur, murmured the voices, he takes you for Gorenflot. Ah, it is you, heavy mass, pondus immobile, it is you, indigesta moles. And at each apostrophe, Chicot, arrived at last at his desired vengeance, let fall the cord with all the weight of his arm on the body before him. Silence, whispered the voices again, he takes you for Gorenflot. Mayenne only uttered groans, and made immense efforts to get through. Ah, conspirator, cried Chicot again. Ah, unworthy monk, this is for your drunkenness, this for idleness, this for anger, this for greediness, and this for all the vices you have. Chicot, have pity, whispered Gorenflot. And here, traitor, this is for your treason, continued Chicot. Ah, why did it not please God to substitute for your vulgar carcass the high and mighty shoulders of the Duc de Mayenne, to whom I owe a volley of blows, the interest of which has been accumulating for 7 years? Chicot, cried the Duke. Yes, Chicot, unworthy servant of the king, who wishes he had the 100 arms of Briareus for this occasion. And he redoubled his blows with such violence that the sufferer, making a tremendous effort, pushed himself through, and fell torn and bleeding into the arms of his friends. Chicot's last blow fell into empty space. He turned, and saw that the true Gorenflot had fainted with terror. Chapter 90. What was passing near the Bastille, while Chicot was paying his debt to de Mayenne? It was 11 at night, and the Duc d'Anjou was waiting impatiently at home for a messenger from the Duc Leguise. He walked restlessly up and down, looking every minute at the clock. All at once he heard a horse in the courtyard, and thinking it was the messenger, he ran to the window, but it was a groom leading up and down a horse which was waiting for its master, who almost immediately came out. It was Bussy, who, as captain of the Duke's guards, came to give the password for the night. The Duke, seeing this handsome and brave young man of whom he had never had reason to complain, experienced an instant's remorse, but on his face he read so much joy, hope, and happiness that all his jealousy returned. However, Bussy, ignorant that the Duke was watching him, jumped into his saddle and rode off to his own hotel, where he gave his horse to the groom. There he saw Remai. "Ah, you Remai." "Myself, monsieur." "Not yet in bed." "I have just come in. Indeed, since I have no longer a patient, it seems to me that the days have 48 hours. Are you annoyed?" "I fear so." "Then Gertrude is abandoned." "Perfectly." "You grew tired of being beaten, that was how her love showed itself. And does your heart not speak for her tonight?" "Why tonight?" "Because I would have taken you with me." "To the Bastille?" "Yes." "You are going there?" "Yes." "And Montsoreau is at Campigny preparing a chase for the king." "Are you sure, monsieur?" "The order was given publicly this morning." "Ah well, Jourdain, my sword. You have changed your mind." "I will accompany you to the door for 2 reasons." "What are they?" "Firstly, lest you should meet any enemies." Bussy smiled. "Oh, mon dear, I know you fear no one, and that Remai the doctor is but a poor companion. Still, 2 men are not so likely to be attacked as one. Secondly, because I have a great deal of good advice to give you. Come, my dear Remai, come. We will speak of her, and next to the pleasure of seeing the woman you love, I know none greater than talking of her." Bussy then took the arm of the young doctor, and they set off. Remai on the way tried hard to induce Bussy to return early, insisting that he would be more fit for his duel on the morrow. Bussy smiled. "Fear nothing," said he. "Ah, my dear master, tomorrow you ought to fight like Hercules against Antus, like Theseus against the Minotaur, like Bayard, like something Homeric, gigantic, impossible. I wish people to speak of it in future times as the combat par excellence, and in which you had not even received a scratch. Be easy, my dear Remai, you shall see wonders. This morning I put swords in the hands of 4 fencers, who during 8 minutes could not touch me once, while I tore their doublets to pieces." So conversing, they arrived in the Rue Saint-Antoine. "Adieu, here we are," said Bussy. "Shall I wait for you?" "Why?" "To make sure that you will return before 2 o'clock, and have at least 5 or 6 hours sleep before your duel." "If I give you my word." "Oh, that will be enough. Bussy's word is never doubted." "You have it then." "Then adieu, monsieur." "Adieu, Remai." Remai watched and saw Bussy enter, not this time by the window, but boldly through the door which Gertrude opened for him. Then Remai turned to go home, but he had only gone a few steps when he saw coming towards him 5 armed men, wrapped in cloaks. When they arrived about 10 yards from him, they said good night to each other, and 4 went off in different directions, while the 5th remained stationary. "M. de St. Luc," said Remai. "Remai." "Remai, in person. Is it an indiscretion to ask what your lordship does at this hour so far from the Louvre?" "Ma foi, I am examining by the king's order the physiognomy of the city. He said to me, 'St. Luc, walk about the streets of Paris, and if you hear anyone say I have abdicated, contradict him.'" "And have you heard it?" "Nowhere, and as it is just midnight and I have met no one but M. de Montsoreau, I have dismissed my friends and am about to return." "M. de Montsoreau?" "Yes." "You met him?" "With a troop of armed men, 10 or 12 at least." "Impossible." "Why so?" "He ought to be at Campigny." "He ought to be, but he is not." "But the king's order." "Bah, who obeys the king?" "Did he know you?" "I believe so." "You were but 5. "My 4 friends and I." "And he did not attack you?" "On the contrary, he avoided me, which astonished me, as on seeing him I expected a terrible battle." "Where was he going?" "To the Rue de l'Alexandre." "Ah, mon Dieu." "What?" "M. de St. Luc, a great misfortune is about to happen." "To whom?" "To M. de Bussy." Bussy, speak, Remy, I am his friend, you know. Oh, M. de Bussy thought him at Campigny. Well, and profiting by his absence, is with Madame de Montsoreau. Oh, do you not see, he has had suspicions and has feigned to depart that he might appear unexpectedly. Ah, it is the duck d'Anjou's doing, I believe. Have you good lungs, Remy? Corbleu, like a blacksmith's bellows. Well, let us run, you know the house. Yes. Go on then, and the young men set off like hunted deer. Is he much in advance of us? Said Remy. About a quarter of an hour. If we do but arrive in time. Chapter 91. The Assassination. Bussy, himself without disquietude or hesitation, had been received by Diana without fear, for she believed herself sure of the absence of M. de Montsoreau. Never had this beautiful woman been more beautiful, nor Bussy more happy. She was moved, however, by fears for the morrow's combat, now so near, and she repeated to him again and again the anxiety she felt about it, and questioned him as to the arrangements he had made for flight. To conquer was not all. There was afterwards the king's anger to avoid, for it was not probable that he would ever pardon the death or defeat of his favourites. And then, said she, are you not acknowledged to be the bravest man in France? Why make it a point of honour to augment your glory? You are already superior to other men, and you do not wish to please any other woman but me, Louis. Therefore guard your life, or rather, for I think there is not a man in France capable of killing you, Louis. I should say, take care of wounds, for you may be wounded. Indeed, it was through a wound received in fighting with these same men that I first made your acquaintance. Make yourself easy, said Bussy, smiling. I will take care of my face, I shall not be disfigured. Oh, take care of yourself altogether. Think of the grief you would experience if you saw me brought home wounded and bleeding, and that I should feel the same grief on seeing your blood. Be prudent, my too courageous hero, that is all I ask. Act like the Roman of whom you read to me the other day. Let your friends fight, aid the one who needs it most, but if 2 men attack you, fly. You can turn like Horatius and kill them one after another. Yes, my dear Diana. Oh, you reply without hearing me, Louis. You look at me and do not listen. But I see you, and you are beautiful. Do not think of my beauty just now. Mon dear, it is your life I am speaking of. Stay, I will tell you something that will make you more prudent. I shall have the courage to witness this duel. You. I shall be there. Impossible, Diana. No, listen. There is in the room next to this a window looking into a little court, but with a side view of the Tournelles. Yes, I remember, the window from which I threw crumbs to the birds the other day. From there I can have a view of the ground, therefore, above all things, take care to stand so that I can see you. You will know that I am there, but do not look at me, lest your enemy should profit by it. And kill me while I had my eyes fixed upon you. If I had to choose my death, Diana, that is the one I should prefer. Yes, but now you are not to die but live. And I will live, therefore tranquilize yourself, Diana. Besides, I am well seconded, you do not know my friends. Enriched uses his sword as well as I do. Riberac is so steady on the ground that his eyes and his arms alone seem to be alive, and Liverot is as active as a tiger. Believe me, Diana, I wish there were more danger, for there would be more honour. Well, I believe you, and I smile and hope, but listen and promise to obey me. Yes, if you do not tell me to leave. It is just what I am about to do. I appeal to your reason. Then you should not have made me mad. No nonsense but obedience, that is the way to prove your love. Order then. Dear friend, you want a long sleep, go home. Not already. Yes, I am going to pray for you. Pray now then. As he spoke, a pane of the window flew into pieces, then the window itself, and 3 armed men appeared on the balcony while a 4th was climbing over. This one had his face covered with a mask, and held in his right hand a sword, and in his left a pistol. Bussy remained paralyzed for a moment by the dreadful cry uttered by Diana at this sight. The masked man made a sign, and the 3 others advanced. Bussy put Diana back and drew his sword. Come, my brave fellows, said a sepulchral voice from under the mask. He is already half dead with fear. You are wrong, said Bussy. I never feel fear. Diana drew near him. Go back, Diana, said he, but she threw herself on his neck. You will get me killed, said he, and she drew back. Ah, said the masked man, it is M. de Bussy, and I would not believe it, fool that I was. Really, what a good and excellent friend. He learns that the husband is absent and has left his wife alone, and fears she may be afraid, so he comes to keep her company, although on the eve of a duel. I repeat, he is a good and excellent friend. Ah, it is you, M. de Montsoreau, said Bussy, throw off your mask. I will, said he, doing so. Diana uttered another cry. The Count was as pale as a corpse, but he smiled like a demon. Let us finish, monsieur, said Bussy. It was very well for Homer's heroes who were demigods to talk before they fought, but I am a man, attack me or let me pass. Montsoreau replied by a laugh which made Diana shudder, but raised Bussy's anger. Let me pass, cried he. Oh, oath. Then draw and have done. I wish to go home and I live far off. During this time 2 other men mounted into the balcony. 2 and 4 make 6, said Bussy. Where are the others? Waiting at the door. Diana fell on her knees, and in spite of her efforts Bussy heard her sobs. My dear Count, said he, you know I am a man of honour. Yes, you are, and Madame is a faithful wife. Good monsieur, you are severe, but perhaps it is deserved. Only as I have a prior engagement with 4 gentlemen, I beg to be allowed to retire tonight, and I pledge my word you shall find me again, when and where you will. Montsoreau shrugged his shoulders. I swear to you, monsieur, said Bussy, that when I have satisfied Quelus, Scarmug, Depernon and Modern, I shall be at your service. If they kill me, your vengeance will be satisfied, and if not. Montsoreau turned to his men. On, my brave fellows, said he. Oh, said Bussy, I was wrong, it is not a duel but an assassination. Yes. We were each deceived with regard to the other, but remember, monsieur, that the Duc d'Anjou will avenge me. It was he who sent me. Diana groaned. Instantaneously Bussy overturned the prie-dieu, drew a table towards him and threw a chair over all, so that in a second he had formed a kind of rampart between himself and his enemies. This movement had been so rapid that the ball fired at him from the arquebuse only struck the prie-dieu. Diana sobbed aloud. Bussy glanced at her, and then at his assailants, crying, Come on, but take care, for my sword is sharp. The men advanced, and one tried to seize the prie-dieu, but before he reached it, Bussy's sword pierced his arm. The man uttered a cry and fell back. Bussy then heard rapid steps in the corridor and thought he was surrounded. He flew to the door to lock it, but before he could reach it, it was opened, and 2 men rushed in. Ah, dear master, cried a well-known voice, are we in time? Remise. And I, cried a second voice, it seems they are attempting assassination here. St. Luc, cried Bussy joyfully. Ah, M. de Montsoreau, I think now you will do well to let us pass, for if you do not we will pass over you. 3 more men, cried Montsoreau, and they saw 3 new assailants appear on the balcony. They are an army, cried St. Luc. Oh, God protect him, cried Diana. Wretch, cried Montsoreau, and he advanced to strike her. Bussy saw the movement. Agile as a tiger, he bounded on him and touched him in the throat, but the distance was too great, it was only a scratch. 5 or 6 men rushed on Bussy, but one fell beneath the sword of St. Luc. Remise, cried Bussy, carry away Diana. Montsoreau uttered a yell and snatched a pistol from one of the men. Remise hesitated. But you, said he. Away, away, I confide her to you. Come, madame, said Remise. Never, I will never leave him. Remise seized her in his arms. Bussy, help me, Bussy, cried Diana, for anyone who separated her from Bussy seemed an enemy to her. Go, cried Bussy, I will rejoin you. At this moment Montsoreau fired, and Bussy saw Remise totter and then fall, dragging Diana with him. Bussy uttered a cry and turned. It is nothing, master, said Remise. It was I who received the ball, she is safe. As Bussy turned, 3 men threw themselves on him. St. Luc rushed forward and one of them fell. The 2 others drew back. St. Luc, cried Bussy, by her you love save Diana. But you... I am a man. St. Luc rushed to Diana, seized her in his arms and disappeared through the door. Here my men from the staircase, shouted Montsoreau. Ah, coward, cried Bussy. Montsoreau retreated behind his men. Bussy gave a back stroke and a thrust. With the first he cleft open a head, and with the second pierced a breast. That clears, cried he. Fly, master, cried Ramai. Diana must save herself first, murmured he. Take care, cried Ramai again, as 4 men rushed in through the door from the staircase. Bussy saw himself between 2 troops, but his only cry was, Ah, Diana. Then, without losing a second, he rushed on the 4 men, and taken by surprise, 2 fell, 1 dead, 1 wounded. Then, as Montsoreau advanced, he retreated again behind his rampart. Push the bolts and turn the key, cried Montsoreau. We have him now. During this time, by a great effort, Ramai had dragged himself before Bussy and added his body to the rampart. There was an instant's pause. Bussy looked around him. 7 men lay stretched on the ground, but 9 remained. And seeing these 9 swords and hearing Montsoreau encouraging them, this brave man who had never known fear, saw plainly before him the image of death, beckoning him with its gloomy smile. I may kill 5 more, thought he, but the other 4 will kill me. I have strength for 10 minutes more combat. In that 10 minutes let me do what man never did before. And rushing forward, he gave 3 thrusts, and 3 times he pierced the leather of a shoulder belt or the buff of a jacket, and 3 times a stream of blood followed. During this time he had parried 20 blows with his left arm, and his cloak, which he had wrapped round it, was hacked to pieces. The men changed their tactics. Seeing 2 of their number fall and 1 retire, they renounced the sword, and some tried to strike with the butt ends of their muskets, while others fired at him with pistols. He avoided the balls by jumping from side to side, or by stooping, for he seemed not only to see, hear, and act, but to divine every movement of his enemies, and appeared more than a man, or only man because he was mortal. Then he thought that to kill Montsoreau would be the best way to end the combat, and sought him with his eyes among his assailants, but he stood in the background, loading the pistols for his men. However, Bussy rushed forward and found himself face to face with him. He, who held a loaded pistol, fired, and the ball, striking Bussy's sword, broke it off 6 inches from the handle. Disarmed, cried Montsoreau. Bussy drew back, picking up his broken blade, and in an instant it was fastened to the handle with a handkerchief. And the battle recommenced, presenting the extraordinary spectacle of a man almost without arms, but also almost without wounds, keeping 6 enemies at bay, and with 10 corpses at his feet for a rampart. When the fight began again, Montsoreau commenced to draw away the bodies, lest Bussy should snatch a sword from one of them. Bussy was surrounded, the blade of his sword bent and shook in his hand, and fatigue began to render his arm heavy, when suddenly one of the bodies raising itself pushed a rapier into his hand. It was Ramai's last act of devotion. Bussy uttered a cry of joy and threw away his broken sword. At the same moment Montsoreau fired at Ramai, and the ball entered his brain. This time he fell to rise no more. Bussy uttered a cry. His strength seemed to return to him, and he whirled round his sword in a circle, cutting through a wrist at his right hand, and laying open a cheek at his left. Exhausted by the effort, he let his right arm fall for a moment, while with his left he tried to undraw the bolts behind him. During this second he received a ball in his thigh, and 2 swords touched his side. But he had unfastened the bolt and turned the key. Sublime with rage, he rushed on Montsoreau and wounded him in the breast. Ah, cried Bussy, I begin to think I shall escape. The 4 men rushed on him, but they could not touch him and were repulsed with blows. Montsoreau approached him twice more, and twice more was wounded. But 3 men seized hold of the handle of his sword and tore it from him. He seized a stool of carved wood and struck 3 blows with it and knocked down 2 men, but it broke on the shoulder of the 3rd, who sent his dagger into Bussy's breast. Bussy seized him by the wrist, forced the dagger from him and stabbed him to the heart. The last man jumped out of the window. Bussy made 2 steps to follow him, but Montsoreau, raising himself from the floor where he was lying, wounded him in the leg with his dagger. The young man seized a sword which lay near, and plunged it so vigorously into his breast that he pinned him to the floor. Ah, cried Bussy, I do not know if I shall live, but at least I shall have seen you die. Bussy dragged himself to the corridor, his wounds bleeding fearfully. He threw a last glance behind him. The moon was shining brilliantly, and its light penetrated this room inundated with blood, and illuminated the walls pierced by balls and hacked by blows, and lighted up the pale faces of the dead, which even then seemed to preserve the fierce look of assassins. Bussy, at the sight of this field of battle, peopled by him with slain nearly dying as he was, experienced a feeling of pride. As he had intended, he had done what no man had done before him. There now remained to him only to fly. But all was not over for the unfortunate young man. On arriving on the staircase, he saw arms shine in the courtyard. Someone fired, and the ball pierced his shoulder. The court being guarded, he thought of the little window, where Diana had said she would sit to see the combat, and as quickly as he could he dragged himself there, and locked the door behind him. Then he mounted the window with great difficulty, and measured the distance with his eyes, wondering if he could jump to the other side. "Oh, I shall never have the strength," cried he. But at that moment he heard steps coming up the staircase. It was the second troop mounting. He collected all his strength and made a spring, but his foot slipped, and he fell on the iron spikes which caught his clothes, and he hung suspended. He thought of his only friend. "St. Luc," cried he, "help, St. Luc." "Ah, it is you, M. de Bussy," answered a voice from behind some trees. Bussy shuddered, for it was not the voice of St. Luc. "St. Luc," cried he again, "come to me, Diana is safe, I have killed Montsoreau." "Ah, Montsoreau is killed," said the same voice. Yes, then Bussy saw two men come out from behind the trees. "Gentlemen," cried he, "in heaven's name, help an unfortunate nobleman who may still escape if you aid him." "What do you say, Monseigneur?" said one. "Imprudent," said the other. "Monseigneur," cried Bussy, who heard the conversation, "deliver me, and I will pardon you for betraying me." "Do you hear?" said the Duke. "What do you order?" "That you deliver him from his sufferings," said he with a kind of laugh. Bussy turned his head to look at the man who laughed at such a time, and at the same instant an arquebuse was discharged into his breast. "Cursed assassin, oh Diana," murmured he, and fell back dead. "Is he dead?" cried several men who, after forcing the door, appeared at the windows. "Yes," said Aurélie, "but fly, remember that His Highness the Duc d'Anjou was the friend and protector of M. de Bussy." The men instantly made off, and when the sound of their steps was lost, the Duke said, "Now, Aurélie, go up into the room and throw out of the window the body of Montsoreau." Aurélie obeyed, and the blood fell over the clothes of the Duke, who, however, raised the coat of the dead man, and drew out the paper which he had signed. "This is all I wanted," said he, "so now let us go." "And Diana?" "Ma foi, I care no more for her. Untie her and St. Luc and let them go." Aurélie disappeared. "I shall not be King of France," murmured the Duke, "but at all events I shall not be beheaded for high treason." Chapter 92. How Brother Gorenflot found himself more than ever between a gallows and an abbey. The guard placed to catch the conspirators got none of them, they all escaped as we have seen. Therefore when Crillon at last broke open the door he found the place deserted and empty. In vain they opened doors and windows, in vain the king cried, "Chicot!" No one answered. "Can they have killed him?" said he. "Mordieu, if they have they shall pay for it." Chicot did not reply, because he was occupied in beating M. de Mayenne, which gave him so much pleasure that he neither heard nor saw what was passing. However, when the Duke had disappeared, he heard and recognized the royal voice. "Here, my son, here," he cried, trying at the same time to raise Gorenflot, who, beginning to recover himself, cried, "Monsieur Chicot." "You are not dead, then?" "My good M. Chicot, you will not give me up to my enemies." "Wretchy!" Gorenflot began to howl and wring his hands. "I who have had so many good dinners with you," continued Gorenflot. "I who drank so well that you always called me the king of the sponges. I who loved so much the capons you used to order at the corn d'abondance that I never left anything but the bones." This climax appeared sublime to Chicot, and determined him to clemency. "Here they are, mon Dieu," cried Gorenflot, vainly trying to rise. "Here they come, I am lost. Oh, good M. Chicot, help me." And finding he could not rise, he threw himself with his face to the ground. "Get up," said Chicot. "Do you pardon me?" "We shall see." "You have beaten me so much." Chicot laughed. The poor monk fancied he had received the blows given to Mayenne. "You laugh, M. Chicot." "I do, animals." "Then I shall live." "Perhaps." "You would not laugh if your Gorenflot was about to die." "It does not depend upon me but on the king. He alone has the power of life and death." At this moment lights appeared, and a crowd of embroidered dresses and swords shining in the light of the torches. "Ah, Chicot, my dear Chicot, how glad I am to see you," cried the king. "You hear, good Chicot," whispered Gorenflot, "this great prince is glad to see you." Well, in his happiness he would not refuse you a favor. Ask for my pardon." "What, from Herod?" "Oh, silence, dear Chicot." "Well, sire, how many have you caught?" said Chicot, advancing. "Confiteor," said Gorenflot. "Not one," said Crillon. "The traitors must have found some opening unknown to us." "It is probable." "But you saw them," said the king. "Oh, you recognized them, no doubt." "No, sire. Not recognized them. That is to say, I recognized only one." "Who was that?" De Mayenne." De Mayenne, to whom you owed." "Yes, sire, we are quits." "Ah, tell me about that, Chicot." "Afterwards, my son, now let us think of the present." "Confiteor," repeated Gorenflot. "Ah, you have made a prisoner," said Crillon, laying his large hand on the monk's shoulder. Chicot was silent for a minute, leaving Gorenflot a prey to all the anguish of such profound terror that he nearly fainted again. At last Chicot said, "Sire, look well at this monk." "The preacher Gorenflot," cried Henry. "Confiteor, Confiteor," repeated he. "Himself," said Chicot. "He who as—" "Just so," interrupted Chicot. Gorenflot shook with terror, for he heard the sounds of swords clashing. "Wait," said Chicot, "the king must know all." And taking him aside, "My son," said he, "thank God for having permitted this holy man to be born 35 years ago, for it is he who has saved us all." "How so?" "It was he who recounted to me the whole plot, from the Alpha to the Omega." "When?" "About a week ago, so that if ever your majesty's enemies catch him he will be a dead man." Gorenflot heard only the last words, "a dead man," and he covered his face with his hands. "Worthy man," said the king, casting a benevolent look on the mass of flesh before him, "we will cover him with our protection." Gorenflot perceived the nature of the look, and began to feel relieved. "You will do well, my king," said Chicot. "What must we do with him?" "I think that as long as he remains in Paris, he will be in danger." "If I gave him guards?" Gorenflot heard this proposition of Henry's. "Well," thought he, "I shall get off with imprisonment. I prefer that to beating if they only feed me well." "Oh no, that is needless," said Chicot, "if you will allow me to take him with me." "Where?" "Home." "Well, take him and then return to the Louvre." "Get up, reverend father," said Chicot. "He mocks me," murmured Gorenflot. "Get up, brute," whispered Chicot, giving him a sly kick. "Ah, I have deserved it," cried Gorenflot. "What does he say?" asked the king. "Sire, he is thinking over all his fatigues and his tortures, and when I promised him your protection he said, 'Oh, I have well merited that.'" "Poor devil," said the king, "take good care of him." "Oh, be easy, sire, he will want for nothing with me." "Oh, Chicot, dear Chicot," cried Gorenflot, "where am I to be taken to?" "You will know soon. Meanwhile, monster of iniquity, thank his majesty." "What for?" "Thank him, I tell you." "Sire," stammered Gorenflot, "since your gracious majesty—" "Yes," interrupted Henry, "I know all you did for me in your journey from Lyon on the evening of the League, and again today. Be easy, you shall be recompensed according to your merits." Gorenflot sighed. "Where is Panurge?" said Chicot. "In the stable, poor beast." "Well, go and fetch him and return to me." "Yes, Chicot." And the monk went away as fast as he could, much astonished not to be followed by guards. "Now, my son," said Chicot, "keep 20 men for your own escort and send 10 with Crillon to the Hotel d'Anjou, and let them bring your brother here." "Why?" that he may not escape a second time. Did my brother? Have you repented following my advice today? No, par le mordieu. Then do what I tell you. Henry gave the order to Crillon, who set off at once. And you, said Henry. Oh, I am waiting for my saint. And you will rejoin me at the Louvre. In an hour go, my son. Henry went, and Chicot, proceeding to the stables, met Gorenflot coming out on his ass. The poor devil had not an idea of endeavouring to escape from the fate that he thought awaited him. Come, come, said Chicot, we are waited for. Gorenflot made no resistance, but he shed many tears. Chapter 93. Where Chicot guesses why D'Epernon had blood on his feet, and none in his cheeks. The king, returning to the Louvre, found his friends peacefully asleep, except D'Epernon, whose bed was empty. Not come in yet, how imprudent, murmured the king to Chicot, who had also returned and was standing with them by their beds. The fool, having to fight tomorrow with a man like Bussy, and to take no more care than this. Let them seek D'Epernon, said he, going out of the room and speaking to an usher. D'Epernon is just coming in, sire, replied the man. Indeed, D'Epernon came softly along, thinking to glide unperceived to his room. On seeing the king, he looked confused. Ah, here you are at last, said Henry. Come here and look at your friends, they are wise, they understand the importance of the duel tomorrow, but you, instead of praying and sleeping like them, have been running about the streets. Corbleu, how pale you are, what will you look like tomorrow? D'Epernon was indeed pale, but at the king's remark he coloured. Now go to bed, continued Henry, and sleep if you can. Why not? Much time you will have, you are to fight at daybreak, and at this time of year the sun rises at 4, it is now 2, you have but 2 hours to sleep. 2 hours well employed go a long way. You will sleep then. Well, sire. I do not believe it. Why not? Because you are agitated, you think of tomorrow. I will sleep, sire, if your majesty will only let me. That is just, said Chicot. Indeed, D'Epernon undressed and got into bed, with a calm and satisfied look, that seemed, both to the king and Chicot, to augur well. He is as brave as a Caesar, said the king. So brave that I do not understand it, said Chicot. See, he sleeps already. Chicot approached the bed to look. Oh, said he. What is it? Look, and he pointed to D'Epernon's boots. Blood. He has been walking in blood. Can he be wounded? Said the king anxiously. Bah, he would have told us, and besides, unless he had been wounded like Achilles in the heel. See, the sleeve of his doublet is also spotted. What can have happened to him? Perhaps he has killed someone to keep his hand in. It is singular. Well, tomorrow at least. Today, you mean? Well, today I shall be tranquil. Why so? Because those cursed Angevins will be killed. You think so, Henry? I am sure of it, my friends are brave. I never heard that the Angevins were cowards. No, doubtless, but my friends are so strong. Look at Scamergue's arm, what muscle. Ah, if you saw Otrigues's, is that all that reassures you? No, come and I will show you something. Where? In my room. And this something makes you confident of victory? Yes. Come then. Wait and let me take leave of them. Adieu, my good friends, murmured the king, as he stooped and imprinted a light kiss on each of their foreheads. Chicot was not superstitious, but as he looked on, his imagination pictured a living man making his adieus to the dead. It is singular, thought he, I never felt so before, poor fellows. As soon as the king quitted the room, D'Epernon opened his eyes, and jumping out of bed began to efface, as well as he could, the spots of blood on his clothes. Then he went to bed again. As for Henry, he conducted Chicot to his room, and opened a long ebony coffer lined with white satin. Look, said he. Swords. Yes, but blessed swords, my dear friend. Blessed by whom? By our Holy Father the Pope, who granted me this favour. To send this barks to Rome and back cost me 20 horses and 4 men. Are they sharp? Doubtless, but their great merit is that they are blessed. Yes, I know that, but still I should like to be sure they are sharp. Pagans. Let us talk of something else. Well, be quick. You want to sleep? No, to pray. In that case we will talk. Have you sent for M. Danjou? Yes, he is waiting below. What are you going to do with him? Throw him into the Bastille. That is very wise. Only choose a dungeon that is deep and safe, such, for example, as those which were occupied by the Constable de St. Paul or Armagnac. Oh, be easy. I know where they sell good black velvet, my son. Chicot, he is my brother. Ah, true, the family mourning is violet. Shall you speak to him? Yes, certainly, if only to show him that his plots are discovered. Do you disapprove? In your place I should cut short the conversation and double the imprisonment. Let them bring here the Duc d'Anjou, said the king. A minute after the Duke entered, very pale and disarmed. Crillon followed him. Where did you find him? Asked the king. Sire, His Highness was not at home, but I took possession of his hotel in the king's name, and soon after he returned, and we arrested him without resistance. That is fortunate. Then, turning to the prince, he said, Where were you, monsieur? Wherever I was, sire, be sure it was on your business. I doubt it. Francois Bode. Come, tell me where you were while your accomplices were being arrested. My accomplices? Yes, your accomplices. Sire, your Majesty is making some mistake. Oh, this time you shall not escape me. Your measure of crime is full. Sire, be moderate. There is certainly someone who slanders me to you. Wretch, you shall die of hunger in a cell of the Bastille. I bow to your orders, whatever they may be. Hypocrite, but where were you? Sire, I was serving your Majesty, and working for the glory and tranquillity of your reign. Really, your audacity is great. Bah, said Chicot, tell us about it, my prince, it must be curious. Sire, I would tell your Majesty, had you treated me as a brother, but as you have treated me as a criminal, I will let the event speak for itself. Then, bowing profoundly to the king, he turned to Crillon and the other officers and said, Now, which of you gentlemen will conduct the first prince of the blood to the Bastille? Chicot had been reflecting, and a thought struck him. Ah, murmured he, I believe I guess now why M. d'Epernay had so much blood on his feet and so little in his cheeks. Chapter 94. The morning of the combat. The king did not sleep all night, and very early in the morning he set off, accompanied by Chicot, to examine the ground where the combat was to take place. Quelus will be exposed to the sun, said he. He will have it at his right, just in his only eye, whereas Maugierne, who has good eyes, will be in the shade. That is badly managed. As for Scaramouche, his place is good, but Quelus, my poor Quelus. Do not torment yourself so, my king, it is useless. And d'Epernay, I am really unjust not to think of him, he who is to fight Bussy. Look at his place, Chicot, he who will have to give way constantly, for Bussy is like a tiger, he has a tree on his right and a ditch on his left. Bah, said Chicot, I am not concerned about d'Epernay. You are wrong, he will be killed. Not he, be sure he has taken precautions. How so? He will not fight. Did you not hear what he said before going to bed? That is just why I think he will not fight. Incredulous and distrustful. I know my Gascon, Henry, but if you will take my advice you will return to the Louvre. Do you think I can stay there during the combat? I do not wish you not to love your friends, but I do wish you not to leave M. d'Anjou alone at the Louvre. Is not Crillon there? Crillon is only a buffalo, a rhinoceros, a wild boar, while your brother is the serpent whose strength lies in his cunning. You are right, I should have sent him to the Bastille. When Chicot and the king entered, the young men were being dressed by their valets. Good morning, gentlemen, said he. I find you all in good spirits, I hope. Yes, sire, said Quelus. You look gloomy, Margend. Sire, I am superstitious, and I had bad dreams last night, so I am drinking a little wine to keep up my spirits. My friend, remember that dreams are the impressions of the previous day, and have no influence on the morrow. Yes, sire, said D'Epernon, I also had bad dreams last night, but in spite of that my hand is steady and fit for action. Yes, said Chicot, you dreamed you had blood on your boots. That is not a bad dream, for it signifies that you will be a conqueror like Alexandre or Caesar. My friends, said Henry, remember you fight only for honor. The past night has seated me firmly on my throne, therefore do not think of me. And above all things, no false bravery. You wish to kill your enemies, not to die yourselves. The gentlemen were now ready, and it only remained to take leave of their master. Do you go on horseback? Asked he. No, sire, on foot. They each kissed his hand, and D'Epernon said, Sire, bless my sword. Not so, D'Epernon, give up your sword, I have a better one for each of you. Chicot, bring them here. No, sire, send your captain of the guards. I am but a pagan, and they might lose their virtue by coming through my hands. What are these swords, sire? Said Scaramouche. Italian swords, my son, forged at Milan. Thanks, sire. Now go, it is time, said the king, who could hardly control his emotion. Sire, said Quelus, shall we not have your majesty's presence to encourage us? No, that would not be right. You will be supposed to fight without anyone being cognizant of it, and without my sanction. Let it appear to be the result of a private quarrel. When they were gone, the king threw himself down in tears. Now, said Chicot, I will go to see this duel, for I have an idea that something curious will happen with regard to D'Epernon, and he went off. Henry shut himself up in his own room, first saying to Crillon, who knew what was to take place, If we are conquerors, Crillon, come and tell me, if not, strike 3 blows on the door. Chapter 95. The Friends of Bussy. The friends of the Duc d'Anjou had passed as good and tranquil a night as those of the king, although their master had not taken the same care of them. After a good supper, they had all retired to sleep at Antraigues' house, which was nearest to the field of battle. Antraigues before supper had gone to take leave of a little milliner whom he adored, Riberac had written to his mother, and Liverat had made his will. They were up early in the morning, and dressed themselves in red breeches and socks, that their enemies might not see their blood, and they had doublets of grey silk. They wore shoes without heels, and their pages carried their swords, that their arms might not be fatigued. The weather was splendid for love, war, or walking, and the sun gilded the roofs on which the night dew was sparkling. The streets were dry and the air delightful. Before leaving the house, the young men had sent to the Hotel d'Anjou to inquire for Bussy, and had received a reply that he had gone out the evening before and had not yet returned. Oh, said Antraigues, I know where he is. The king ordered a grand chase at Campigny, and M. de Montsoreau was to set off yesterday. It is all right, gentlemen, he is nearer the ground than we are and may be there before us. We will call for him in passing. The streets were empty as they went along. No one was to be seen except peasants coming from Montreuil or Vincennes, with milk or vegetables. The young men went on in silence until they reached the Rue Saint-Antoine. Then, with a smile, they glanced at Montsoreau's house. One could see well from there, and I am sure poor Diana will be more than once at the window, said Antraigues. I think she must be there already, said Riberac, for the window is open. True, but what can be the meaning of that ladder before it? It is odd. We are not the only ones to wonder, said Liverat. See those peasants who are stopping their carts to look. The young men arrived under the balcony. M. de Montsoreau, they cried, do you intend to be present at our combat? If so, be quick, for we wish to arrive first. They waited, but no one answered. Did you put up that ladder? Asked Antraigues of a man who was examining the ground. God forbid, replied he. Why so? Look up. Blood, cried Riberac. The door has been forced, said Antraigues, and seizing the ladder he was on the balcony in a moment. What is it? Cried the others, seeing him turn pale. A terrible cry was his only answer. Liverat mounted behind him. Corpses, death everywhere. cried he, and they both entered the room. It bore horrible traces of the terrible combat of the previous night. A river of blood flowed over the room, and the curtains were hanging in strips from sword cuts. "Oh, poor Remy," cried Enriched suddenly. "Dead?" "Yes." "But a regiment of troopers must have passed through the room," cried Liverat. Then, seeing the door of the corridor open, and traces of blood indicating that one or more of the combatants had also passed through there, he followed it. Meanwhile Enriched went into the adjoining room. There also blood was everywhere, and this blood led to the window. He leaned out and looked into the little garden. The iron spike still held the livid corpse of the unhappy Bussy. At this sight it was not a cry but a yell that Enriched uttered. Liverat ran to see what it was, and Riberac followed. "Look," said Enriched, "Bussy dead, Bussy assassinated and thrown out of window." They ran down. "It is he," cried Liverat. "His wrist is cut. He has 2 balls in his breast. He is full of wounds. Ah, poor Bussy, we will have vengeance." Turning round they came against a second corpse. "Montsoreau," cried Liverat. "What, Montsoreau also?" "Yes, pierced through and through." "Ah, they have assassinated all our friends." "And his wife, Madame de Montsoreau," cried Enriched, but no one answered. "Bussy, poor Bussy." "Yes, they wish to get rid of the most formidable of us all." "It is cowardly, it is infamous." "We will tell the Duke." "No," said Enriched, "let us not charge anyone with the care of our vengeance. Look, my friends, at the noble face of the bravest of men. See his blood that teaches that he never left his vengeance to any other person. Bussy, we will act like you, and we will avenge you." Then, drawing his sword, he dipped it in Bussy's blood. "Bussy," said he, "I swear on your corpse that this blood shall be washed off by the blood of your enemies." "Bussy," cried the others, "we swear to kill them or die." "No mercy," said Enriched. "But we shall be but 3. "True, but we have assassinated no one, and God will strengthen the innocent. Adieu, Bussy." "Adieu, Bussy," repeated the others, and they went out pale but resolute from that cursed house, around which a crowd had begun to collect. Arriving on the ground, they found their opponents waiting for them. "Gentlemen," said Quelus, rising and bowing, "we have had the honor of waiting for you." "Excuse us," said Enriched, "but we should have been here before you but for one of our companions." "M. de Bussy," said D'Epernon, "I do not see him. Where is he?" "We can wait for him," said Scaramouche. "He will not come." All looked thunderstruck, but D'Epernon exclaimed, "Ah, the brave man par excellence, is he then afraid?" "That cannot be," said Quelus. "You are right, monsieur," said Liverat. "And why will he not come?" "Because he is dead." "Dead," cried they all, but D'Epernon turned rather pale. "And dead because he has been assassinated," said Enriched. "Did you not know it, gentlemen?" "No, how should we?" "Besides, is it certain?" Enriched drew his sword. "So certain that here is his blood," said he. "M. de Bussy assassinated." "His blood cries for vengeance. Do you not hear it, gentlemen?" said Riberac. "What do you mean?" "Seek whom the crime profits, the law says," replied Riberac. "Ah, gentlemen, will you explain yourselves?" cried Modern. "That is just what we have come for." "Quick, our swords are in our hands," said D'Epernon. "Oh, you are in a great hurry, M. le Gascon. You did not crow so loud when we were 4 against 4. "Is it our fault if you are only 3? "Yes, it is your fault. He is dead because you preferred him lying in his blood to standing here. He is dead with his wrist cut that that wrist might no longer hold a sword. He is dead that you might not see the lightning of those eyes which dazzled you all. Do you understand me? Am I clear?" "Enough, gentlemen," said Quelus. "Retire, M. D'Epernon, we will fight 3 against 3. These gentlemen shall see if we are men to profit by a misfortune which we deplore as much as themselves. Come, gentlemen," added the young mole, throwing his hat behind him and raising his left hand while he whirled his sword with the right. "God is our judge if we are assassins." "Ah, I hated you before," cried Scaramouche, "and now I execrate you." On your guard, gentlemen, cried Antragues. With doublets or without, said Scarmug. Without doublets, without shirts, our breasts bare, our hearts uncovered. The young men threw off their doublets and shirts. I have lost my dagger, said Quelus, it must have fallen on the road. Or else you left it at M. de Montsoreau's in the Place de la Bastille, said Antragues. Quelus gave a cry of rage and drew his sword. But he has no dagger, M. Antragues, cried Chicot, who had just arrived. So much the worse for him, it is not my fault, said Antragues. Chapter 96. The combat. The place where this terrible combat was to take place was sequestered and shaded by trees. It was generally frequented only by children, who came to play there during the day, or by drunkards or robbers, who made a sleeping place of it by night. Chicot, his heart palpitating, although he was not of a very tender nature, seated himself before the lackeys and pages, on a wooden balustrade. He did not love the Angevins and detested the minions, but they were all brave young men, and in their veins flowed a generous blood, which he was probably destined to see flow before long. D'Epernon made a last bravado. What, you are all afraid of me, he cried. Hold your tongue, said Antragues. Come away, bravest of the brave, said Chicot, or else you will lose another pair of shoes. What do you mean? I mean that there will soon be blood on the ground, and that you will walk in it, as you did last night. D'Epernon became deadly pale, and, moving away, he seated himself at some distance from Chicot. The combat began as 5 o'clock struck, and for a few minutes nothing was heard but the clashing of swords, not a blow was struck. At last Scarmug touched Riberac in the shoulder and the blood gushed out. Scarmug tried to repeat the blow, but Riberac struck up his sword and wounded him in the side. Now let us rest a few seconds if you like, said Riberac. Quelus, having no dagger, was at a great disadvantage, for he was obliged to parry with his left arm, and as it was bare on each occasion it cost him a wound. His hand was soon bleeding in several places, and Antragues had also wounded him in the breast, but at each wound he repeated, It is nothing. Liverat and Maugiron were still unwounded. Riberac and Scarmug recommenced. The former was pierced through the breast, and Scarmug was wounded in the neck. Riberac was mortally wounded, and Scarmug rushed on him and gave him another. But he, with his right hand, seized his opponent S, and with his left plunged his dagger into his heart. Scarmug fell back, dragging Riberac with him. Liverat ran to aid Riberac to disengage himself from the grasp of his adversary, but was closely pursued by Maugiron, who cut open his head with a blow of his sword. Liverat let his sword drop and fell on his knees, then Maugiron hastened to give him another wound, and he fell altogether. Quelus and Maugiron remained against Antragues. Quelus was bleeding, but from slight wounds. Antragues comprehended his danger. He had not the least wound, but he began to feel tired, so he pushed aside Quelus' sword and jumped over a barrier. But at the same moment, Maugiron attacked him behind. Antragues turned, and Quelus profited by this movement to get under the barrier. He is lost, thought Chicot. Vive le roi, cried D'Epernon. Silence, if you please, monsieur, said Antragues. At this instant Liverat, of whom no one was thinking, rose on his knees, hideous from the blood with which he was covered, and plunged his dagger between the shoulders of Maugiron, who fell, crying out, Mon Dieu, I am killed. Liverat fell back again, fainting. M. de Quelus, said Antragues, you are a brave man, yield, I offer you your life. And why yield? You are wounded, and I am not. Vive le roi, cried Quelus, I have still my sword, and he rushed on Antragues, who parried the thrust, and seizing his arm wrested his sword from him, saying, Now you have it no longer. Oh, a sword, cried Quelus, and bounding like a tiger on Antragues he threw his arms round him. Antragues struck him with his dagger again and again, but Quelus managed to seize his hands, and twisted round him like a serpent, with arms and legs. Antragues, nearly suffocated, reeled and fell, but on the unfortunate Quelus. He managed to disengage himself, for Quelus' powers were failing him, and leaning on one arm gave him a last blow. Vive le roi, said Quelus, and that was all. The silence and terror of death reigned everywhere. Antragues rose, covered with blood, but it was that of his enemy. D'Epernon made the sign of the cross, and fled as if he were pursued by demons. Chicot ran and raised Quelus, whose blood was pouring out from 19 wounds. The movement roused him, and he opened his eyes. "Antragues," said he, "on my honor I am innocent of the death of Bussy." "Oh, I believe you, monsieur," cried Antragues, much moved. "Fly," murmured Quelus, "the king will never forgive you." "I cannot abandon you thus, even to escape the scaffold." "Save yourself, young man," said Chicot. "Do not tempt Providence twice in one day." Antragues approached Riberac, who still breathed. "Well," asked he. "We are victors," said Antragues in a low tone not to offend Quelus. "Thanks," said Riberac, "now go." And he fainted again. Antragues picked up his own sword, which he had dropped, then that of Quelus, which he presented to him. A tear shone in the eyes of the dying man. "We might have been friends," he murmured. "Now fly," said Chicot. "You are worthy of being saved." "And my companions?" "I will take care of them, as of the king's friends." Antragues wrapped himself in a cloak which his squire handed to him, so that no one might see the blood with which he was covered, and leaving the dead and wounded, he disappeared through the Porte Saint Antoine. Chapter 97. The End. The king, pale with anxiety, and shuddering at the slightest noise, employed himself in conjecturing, with the experience of a practised man, the time that it would take for the antagonists to meet, and that the combat would last. "Now," he murmured first, "they are crossing the Rue Saint Antoine, now they are entering the field, now they have begun." And at these words the poor king, trembling, began to pray. Rising again in a few minutes, he cried, "If Quelus only remembers the thrust I taught him. As for Scaramouche, he is so cool that he ought to kill Riberac. Maugiron also should be more than a match for Liverat. But D'Epernon, he is lost. Fortunately he is the one of the four whom I love least. But if Bussy, the terrible Bussy, after killing him, falls on the others. Ah, my poor friends." "Sire," said Crillon at the door. "What, already?" "Sire, I have no news but that the Duc d'Anjou begs to speak to your majesty." "What for?" "He says that the moment has come for him to tell you what service he rendered your majesty, and that what he has to tell you will calm a part of your fears." "Well, let him come." At this moment they heard a voice crying, "I must speak to the king at once." The king recognized the voice and opened the door. "Here, St. Luc," cried he, "what is it? But mon Dieu, what is the matter? Are they dead?" Indeed, St. Luc, pale, without hat or sword, and spotted with blood, rushed into the king's room. "Sire," cried he, "vengeance, I ask for vengeance." "My poor St. Luc, what is it? You seem in despair." "Sire, one of your subjects, the bravest, noblest, has been murdered this night, traitorously murdered." "Of whom do you speak?" "Sire, you do not love him, I know, but he was faithful and, if need were, would have shed all his blood for your majesty, else he would not have been my friend." "Ah," said the king, who began to understand, and something like a gleam of joy passed over his face. "Vengeance, sire, for M. de Bussy." "M. de Bussy?" "Yes, M. de Bussy, whom 20 assassins poniarded last night. He killed 14 of them." "M. de Bussy dead?" "Yes, sire." "Then he does not fight this morning." St. Luc cast a reproachful glance on the king, who turned away his head, and in doing so saw Crillon still standing at the door. He signed to him to bring in the duke. "No, sire, he will not fight," said St. Luc. "And that is why I ask, not for vengeance, I was wrong to call it so, but for justice. I love my king, and am, above all things, jealous of his honor, and I think that it is a deplorable service which they have rendered to your majesty by killing M. de Bussy." The Duc d'Anjou had just entered, and St. Luc's words had enlightened the king as to the service his brother had boasted of having rendered him. "Do you know what they will say?" continued St. Luc. "They will say, if your friends conquer, that it is because they first murdered Bussy." "And who will dare to say that?" "Pardieu, everyone," said Crillon. "No, monsieur, they shall not say that," replied the king, "for you shall point out the assassin." "I will name him, sire, to clear your majesty from so heinous an accusation," said St. Luc. "Well, do it." The Duc d'Anjou stood quietly by. "Sire," continued St. Luc, Last night they laid a snare for Bussy, while he visited a woman who loved him. The husband, warned by a traitor, came to his house with a troop of assassins. They were everywhere, in the street, in the courtyard, even in the garden. In spite of his power over himself, the Duke grew pale at these last words. Bussy fought like a lion, sire, but numbers overwhelmed him, and he was killed, interrupted the king, and justly. I will certainly not revenge an adulterer. Sire, I have not finished my tale. The unhappy man, after having defended himself for more than half an hour in the room, after having triumphed over his enemies, escaped, bleeding, wounded, and mutilated. He only wanted someone to lend him a saving hand, which I would have done had I not been seized by his assassins, and bound and gagged. Unfortunately, they forgot to take away my sight as well as my speech, for I saw 2 men approach the unlucky Bussy, who was hanging on the iron railings. I heard him entreat them for help, for in these 2 men he had the right to reckon on 2 friends. Well, sire, it is horrible to relate, it was still more horrible to see and hear. One ordered him to be shot and the other obeyed. And you know the assassins, cried the king, moved in spite of himself. Yes, said St. Luke, and turning to the prince with an expression of intense hatred he cried, the assassin, sire, was the prince his friend. The duke stood perfectly quiet and answered, Yes, M. de St. Luc is right, it was I, and your majesty will appreciate my action, for M. de Bussy was my servant, but this morning he was to fight against your majesty. You lie, assassin, cried St. Luc. Bussy, full of wounds, his hands cut to pieces, a ball through his shoulder, and hanging suspended on the iron trellis-work, might have inspired pity in his most cruel enemies. They would have succoured him. But you, the murderer of La Mole and of Coconers, you killed Bussy as you have killed one after another all your friends. You killed Bussy, not because he was the king's enemy, but because he was the confidant of your secrets. Ah, Montsoreau knew well your reason for this crime. Cordieu, cried Crillon, why am I not king? They insult me before you, brother, said the duke, pale with terror. Leave us, Crillon, said the king. The officer obeyed. Justice, sire, justice, cried St. Luc again. Sire, said the duke, will you punish me for having served your majesty's friends this morning? And I, cried St. Luc, I say that the cause which you espouse is accursed, and will be pursued by the anger of God. Sire, when your brother protects our friends, woe to them. The king shuddered. Then they heard hasty steps and voices, followed by a deep silence, and then, as if a voice from heaven came to confirm St. Luc's words, 3 blows were struck slowly and solemnly on the door by the vigorous arm of Crillon. Henry turned deadly pale. Conquered, cried he, my poor friends. What did I tell you, sire? Cried St. Luc, see how murder succeeds. But the king saw nothing, heard nothing. He buried his face in his hands and murmured, Oh, my poor friends, who will tell me about them? I, sire, said Chicot. Well, cried Henry. 2 are dead and the 3rd is dying. Which is the 3rd, Quelus? Where is he? At the Hotel Boissy. The king said no more but rushed from the room. St. Luc had taken Diana home to his wife, and this had kept him from appearing sooner at the Louvre. Jean passed 3 days and nights watching her through the most frightful delirium. On the 4th day, Joan, overcome by fatigue, went to take a little rest. 2 hours after, when she returned, Diana was gone. Quelus died at the Hotel Boissy, in the king's arms, after lingering for 30 days. Henry was inconsolable. He raised 3 magnificent tombs for his friends, on which their effigies were sculptured life-size in marble. He had innumerable masses said for them, and prayed for their souls himself night and morning. For 3 months Chicot never left his master. In September, Chicot received the following letter, dated from the Priory of Beaume. Dear M. Chicot, the air is soft in this place, and the vintage promises to be good this year. They say that the king, whose life I saved, still grieves much. Bring him to the Priory, dear M. Chicot. We will give him wine of 1550, which I have discovered in my cellar, and which is enough to make one forget the greatest grief. For I find in the Holy Writ these words, Good wine rejoices the heart of man. It is in Latin, I will show it you. Come then, dear M. Chicot, come with the king, M. d'Epernon and M. de St. Luc, and we will fatten them all. The Reverend Prior, Dame Gorenflat, your humble servant and friend. P.S. Tell the king that I have not yet had time to pray for the souls of his friends, but when the vintage is over, I shall not fail to do so. Amen, said Chicot. Here are poor devils well recommended to heaven. The end,